to get started, just wanted to help you guys get to know me a little better, and just some things I like to do on the weekends when I'm kind of living the life of the new rich. Snowboarding, dirt biking, rock climbing, and that was a little dicey on that one. But, got through it okay. You got to do base jumping. I mean, you can't go wrong there. And swimming with the sharks, right? I mean, this is just, no, I don't do these sorts of things. I'm a golfer, which is about the most conservative thing you can do. But I bring these up because these are all risky activities, right? And as investors, we get really excited about the deal. We get the adrenaline rush, say, oh, I'm going to make all this money. This is going to be a great opportunity. This is going to be awesome. And that's great. We need that side of the equation, but there is balance in the universe and in the force. You'll learn as you watch those 7 episodes of Star Wars. There's the other side of the equation is risk. There's risk in deals and in real estate transactions, and that's what lenders are really going to be looking at when they go through the underwriting process. And so my background and expertise is in the commercial multifamily lending side of things. And admittedly, a lot of the information here has a slant towards that multifamily. It's the easiest transition for people to go from residential to commercial is the commercial multifamily, meaning 5 units and above. But these same principles do apply to other commercial asset types like office or retail or industrial or hospitality type properties. But really the purpose of this presentation and to provide this intro is to help you guys eliminate risk in the minds of lenders, because you've got these exciting deals you want to do, and the more risk you can eliminate, the better. Angie did a great job of getting us pumped up, and Matt as well, talking about our why and where we want to go. They did a better job than I will, so I'll breeze through this. But this is, it's worth mentioning Grant Cardone. Who's familiar with Grant Cardone in here? He's about half at least. He's a great guy to follow, very enthusiastic, great for sales training. We're all in sales on some levels. You can learn a lot there. He's a big multifamily and passive guy, and really helps you think outside the box and dream big, and good guy to follow. And really, as Matt segued perfectly for us, how big is your dream? How much passive income do you want? What really is your goal, and how does commercial fit in that? Do you want to manage 50, 70, 100 single-family properties, or do you want to do that within 3 or 4 or even 1 property? I know my goal is simply to have 7 income-producing properties that produce $25,000 a month in net cash flows. So you don't need 1 million properties to achieve those goals. All right, so tonight, there's a couple, 4, in fact, takeaways that I want you to get when you're presenting deals to lenders. How to look your best, how to put your best foot forward, how to stack the deck in your favor, and how to crush your competitors. And if you think about it, I'm really only teaching you one thing there. It's just how to succeed. And so I'm trying to make myself look better than I'm going to teach you more than I actually am. That said, have identified 6 blind spots that certainly people transitioning into the commercial space come up against, and a lot of them apply on the residential if you're a new investor in that regard as well. So try to make it obvious about these blind spots, but those will be some good takeaways as well for you. So want to talk about the 5 C's of commercial lending. And if I'll tell you right now, if you ever want to have a bad idea, is come up with five words with the same letter to confuse yourself as you're getting ready for a presentation. Better to create an acronym, if you will. But this is a great story. This is a loan I worked on. It's actually in upstate New York. A father and son came into an inheritance. They didn't have to work towards this lump sum of $800,000. It was a bit of a windfall for them. It wasn't inheritance, and inheritances are probably more common than the lottery. They decided, hey, we got this money, let's be real estate investors. They find this property in upstate New York, 30-unit property. They get it under contract for 1.3 and change million. So a typical loan would require about $330,000 down, about a 25% loan to value. You'll see LTV throughout. That's loan to value. As we go through this, this sucker was is a cash cow. The net operating income, meaning net after expenses, the property was kicking out $181,000, and on this typical loan scenario, your principal and interest payments would be right around $60,000. That's $120,000 a year. That's $10,000 a month. Who would like $10,000 a month? 36% cash on cash return on that sort of deal. It's just crazy. So here's the rub. This father and son team was not prepared at all. In fact, their credit was abysmal. We're talking credit scores in the 500s. They didn't pay their bills. They didn't have any other assets. They had to walk away from this opportunity because their financial house was in such disarray that they lost out on this deal when they had all the equity or the cash to get into it. So again, want to key in on some of the preparation. So if this happens to you, you won't have to walk away from that sort of great opportunity.
Did you buy it?
I did not. No.
It might still be for sale.
Yeah, we actually have another client we showed it to.
Are they interested in partnering?
Perhaps we can.
Do you have? Is it already under contract? Do you guys control the contract?
We don't control the contract. No.
But I think we think somebody's made it.
Yeah.
They might.
Maybe.
Well, do you want to do it?
Well, you can't ask questions from me.
I'll actually buy it. No, I'm serious. Can you email tomorrow? Yeah. I have 3 people that I know that have IRA money.
Okay, email it
Is
to
that
me,
enough?
not to him, so we'll compete with him.
Go ahead. Go ahead. My humble servant. All right, go ahead.
We'll circle back to that. Yeah, it's an exciting
Might
deal.
have helped the video last week.
Character. There's my, okay, here we go. Just pushing too many buttons. Okay. 4 main things we're going to talk about on credit, or character here. Your credit reports, resume, performance on previous loans, and having a written business plan. Pretty simple. Credit reports actually do come into play in the commercial world. It's a little different than the residential world, where simply you need an appraisal, a credit score, and some source of income, and you've got a loan. You've got some matrix, and it's going to shake out what you're going to pay and how it'll work. In commercial, it's important to have a high credit score. Really, 700 and above is really a green light in the commercial world. The higher the better, of course. 650, you kind of need a story. There are loans for people in the 600 range, but you're typically going to pay for that in rate. So it's simply just as it is in the residential space. It's important to have a pulse on your credit score. Know within 10 points where you are. And this is a great book. I've read several. I'm sure Matt could recommend some as well. But Matt's shaking his head. He's familiar with this. It's really something you can, if you sit down, you could read it in 3 or 4 hours. Not that it's that short, but you can get through it pretty quick and really become an expert and know how to improve your credit score quite a bit, applying principles there. Here's our first blind spot. Don't hide the skeletons. Another loan we were working on in Texas, actually. Been working with this investor for a while. He's always a little elusive about his background and his history, and we'd have conversations about it, and it was just a little smoke and mirrors. We'd always be looking at good properties, and actually you got a good property under contract. We're going through the underwriting process, and it comes out there was a bankruptcy in his past, and he'd done the right things with it. But what he did wrong was that he wasn't up front with us as lenders and who he's working with about his situation right up front. You're going to save yourself a lot of time if you're forthright, if you're upfront, if you tell your lender what challenges that you've had in the past, if you've had any. And we can typically work through those, but it's just a much easier and quicker process if you kind of open up the kimono and say, hey, I've fallen down here and there, and important to keep that in mind. Here's a good question, and we don't always think about this. Who's got a real estate resume? Who has actually a paper document that talks about their real estate transactions? Not a job interview resume, but real estate resume. Just a couple hands on this one. This is an important document. Experience is huge in commercial real estate to show what you've done, and the best way to convey that is with a summary of your real estate transactions. And here's just some bullet points. You can jot down some things that are important, that are material to that sort of document. If you're a new investor, you've done, let's say, less than 10 transactions. List those 10 transactions out individually and what happened and the success you've had if you still have those properties. If you're more advanced and have done more than 10, start lumping those transactions together. Maybe do a couple highlights, but certainly say, hey, I've done 15 flips in 2015, and I've wholesaled 20 properties in 2016, and some of your high-level profits. But it's a great document that you can show your lender to help them understand, get comfortable with your experience, your knowledge of real estate. It's also a great document to put in front of equity investors or partners on deals. Partnering is very common in the commercial real estate world. There's not a lot of lone wolves out there, and so as you're forming those partnerships, it's going to make you look that much more professional and together if you can put a resume in front of them. I jumped ahead. That's our second blind spot. Really a great document. Not a lot of people think about putting this together, but it's really going to put you in a good place. Real simple. Pay your mortgage. I think we're all responsible in here. If you've had problems, do everything you can, or if you're experiencing problems, whether it's a residential or commercial property, do everything you can not to turn it back to the lender. That's the biggest black mark you can ever put on your resume or your history. Figure out a way to work it out. And important thing also to have on hand if you've had problems or foreclosures, short sales, that sort of thing, have a letter of explanation already written. Write it when it's fresh on your mind. I think the most important thing there is to first show remorse. I think we're very forgiving in our society, but show remorse and talk about what you did to remedy the property. Talk about what you've learned that will prevent you from ever having a adverse situation like that again in the past. And again, all hope is not lost. There's plenty of people that have had hiccups, stumble and fall that still get financed. And then a written business plan. We've talked. Angie spoke about this. It's not an uncommon business practice, but again, sometimes we don't always think about this in real estate. We get excited. Hey, I'm gonna do this and that. Well, write it down. Put it on paper. Say what you're gonna do to change the rents, to improve the property, what that's gonna mean, how you're gonna increase other income. And what's your long-term plan? What are you going to do with the property in 5, 10, 20 years, or with your portfolio over time? Just having that plan, it doesn't have to be set in stone, but putting that forth again shows you're thoughtful and have a real plan and strategy.
Paul, maybe mention you can email this out to you.
Oh yeah, certainly. Make this available via email. I should have said that up front, but I'll send this out if you know, like furiously taking notes. Not that note taking is a bad practice either. Your capacity. So there's really two elements of the capacity. There's the capacity of the property, which is certainly very important in commercial real estate because we're talking about income producing assets, and then also the capacity of the borrower to perform. There's a couple key documents, especially in multifamily financing and investing, that really is where the ball starts rolling. That's your income statement. You'll hear it referred to as a profit and loss statement, P&L. This is a document that I'll get into that more. I'm jumping ahead. And then your rent roll. And your rent roll is in essence kind of like a balance sheet, but it's a snapshot on a month-over-month basis on how the property is performed and collected rents. A little deeper dive on the P&L, or the profit and loss statement. So you're going to take all your gross income, subtract all your expenses, and that's going to give you your net operating income. Net operating income, or NOI, is a very common term, and that just tells you what sort of income the property produces. There's a couple things you want to include in that, and we look at a lot of financials, and accountants will prepare things, or bookkeepers will prepare things in different ways. You certainly want to include your property taxes, your insurance obligation, and any regular maintenance and repairs. But exclusions, which a lot of times we will see included, and we ultimately end up have to back them out, but are capital expenditures, such if you need to replace a roof or major rehab or some sort of heating or cooling system, those are capital expenditures. You wouldn't include that in your operating statements. Your mortgage obligation is not included in your property and loss. Anyone guess why that would be, even though that's a very real expense?
It's on the balance sheet.
It's on the balance sheet.
So you can figure your cap rate, it's not included in the cap rate.
Very good point. He said so you can calculate your cap rate. So maybe a little confusing for some, but that's accurate. The reason it's not is simply because everyone's going to have a different debt structure. The debt I place on the property is going to be different than what Brian or what Tyler or what Matt puts on it, because they have different scenarios and situations. And so the debt isn't used to calculate the net operating income. It allows you as an investor to have a clean and real pure snapshot of the property, so you can compare property to property. If you included the debt obligation in that, it would muddy those waters, so it's not included. Also, sometimes we see distributions to owners in property and loss statements. That's a no-no. It needs to be line item out separately. Your rent roll. Rent roll is more than just a list of what rents you've collected. A lot of people will see a lot of rent rolls that look like that, but a pure rent roll should include more information than just the unit number and the rent that was collected. Yeah, you can read just as well as I can speak, but those are some of the important things that you like to see on a rent roll, and you just have that snapshot, and you keep a rolling document where you have a month, you have your rent roll from each month, and you can go back and you can see trends, and you can look for opportunities as well. Which segues into the capacity of the property to perform. There's a very important ratio. It's called the debt coverage ratio. Has anyone heard of that before? It's got a couple hands. You'll hear debt coverage. You'll hear debt service coverage ratio. There's a few different terms out there. The debt coverage is simply calculated by taking your net operating income and dividing that by your principal and your interest payment. And so, quick example, these are just some numbers pulled out of thin air, but if you have a net operating income of $90,000 and your principal and interest obligation is $60,000, that would give you a debt coverage ratio of 1.5. This ratio tells the lender how well the property can support itself and pay the underlying debt or the underlying mortgage on the property. And so it's a simple calculation, but it can be a little confusing to wrap your head around. I have a question.
Is this
in the back.
assessed on a per property basis or across your entire portfolio?
It could be both, but it's typically just per property. 'Cause we're typically, there are some loans for what they call scattered sites where it's kind of a portfolio, but it's relatively uncommon. It's usually on a property by property basis. You're more nimble as an investor anyway.
What's the range of like,
Good question. So,
sorry.
I'll pay you later for that great transition. 1.25 is a minimum hurdle. As lenders, we don't want to see anything less than that, because that means the property's income, that there's no buffer to pay that debt. So if you can get that higher, that's better. But 1.25 is a minimum hurdle, and there's actually, as you have higher debt coverage, there's typically price breaks in rate as well. So if there's a higher debt coverage ratio, there's less risk involved, coming back to eliminating risk, which is going to allow you to drop your rate a little bit. Tyler.
As a frame of reference, what would be a significant difference? Would 1.27 be a big difference, or 1.35? From the eyes of the lender, when is it like starting to get good, right?
10 basis points is material, but it can come down to actually just a couple basis points. So meaning just like 1.27 might make a difference. In fact, this is another one of our blind spots. So your debt coverage, if you have a poor debt coverage ratio, it's going to reduce the amount you can borrow. Almost everyone we talk to wants to maximize their leverage and put the most debt they can on the property so they can minimize how much equity they have to contribute. And so if a property doesn't kick out sufficient cash flow, you might be approved and a loan might work perfectly for a 75% loan to value or even 85% loan to value, but at that, we'll call it an 80% loan to value. If the debt coverage is 1.2, for example, it doesn't meet that hurdle, you've got to reduce your loan amount to get it to coincide with that 1.25 debt coverage ratio. So that there's always that contingency on your loan to value, is does it hit the debt coverage ratio as well? A lot of people don't think about that. Most people we talk to, especially new investors, are how much can I borrow? What can I do? Well, you can do up to this, but if it doesn't meet this standard, it's going to reduce the amount you can actually borrow. Clear as mud there? All right. Capacity as a borrower. Personal financial statement is another great document to keep on hand. It's essentially a document that details net worth, and you list your assets, you list your liabilities, and it's going to give you a net worth. How many people keep track of or have a net worth statement? Pretty good number. I'd say good 70%. I spend 15-20 minutes at the end of every month. I've got a running spreadsheet. It helps me to stay on track, know where I am with my goals. It's a good document to visit on a monthly basis. That may be a little anal retentive or overkill, but Matt's shaking his head. It's nice to see that number going up, and it does keep you on track. So we also use, and it's used in the residential world, but the 1003 Universal Loan Application, that'll give you a complete dive if you fill one of those out on what your net worth is, and it'll cover all your assets and liabilities and paint that same picture if you're kind of wondering what to do to start that process.
Can you just Google that statement? So
Oh
you
yeah,
can fill it
yeah.
out? Okay.
1003. Yeah, it's 1003
Your favorite
Universal.
mortgage lender doesn't email you back and send it to you also.
We can send you an editable PDF as well. Borrower capacity. This is real simple. Have on hand your tax returns. I'm sure Matt would love this as well. Have them readily available. It's really pretty easy to keep your tax returns on hand. It's really nice when we're working with borrowers that say, hey, we need your tax returns, and they're in our inbox in 5 minutes. makes you much more enjoyable to work with, and we can move a lot quicker.
I agree.
That said, the complete opposite end of that spectrum, quick story, I'm working on a refinance for a sweet lady, a 74-year-old lady, and you can imagine some of her computer skills and record keeping, and she would admit it, so I'm not throwing anyone under the bus. We're doing a refinance for her on a 34-unit multifamily property in Carson City. This is the refi is going to net her $2,500 a month more in cash flow just from this refi, because she's got some suspect debt on the property. And so this process that should have taken a couple weeks has taken about a couple months. So she's cost herself about $5,000 at least by not having some of her financial documents in order. So it really can make a big difference. Talk about collateral. Commercial real estate, the collateral, you'll hear these rumors. None of this other stuff matters, Paul. It's just about the asset. Well, it certainly is a lot about the asset in commercial real estate, but these other things do matter. But of course, the collateral is a big piece of the puzzle. We're in real estate, right? Location, location, location. Where your commercial property is located certainly matters. You're going to have a lot bigger appetite for properties in major metro areas with robust economies than you will in very rural, small towns without much of anything of an economy. And so be aware of what are economic drivers? What is a military concentration? What's a student concentration? What could go wrong in this economy that might make this property less desirable to lend on? Again, the same things that a lender looks at are things that you as an investor can look at to ascertain your risk as well. The condition of the asset's important. If it's in a dilapidated state, you're not going to get a loan on it. You're going to have to, at least any permanent financing. There are bridge loans to help remediate properties, and those are popular strategies as well. But any long-term permanent financing, it'll need to be in an operational state, and so the condition of the asset is certainly going to be important to getting a loan on it. And there is what's called a property needs assessment that's done in the due diligence process, and we'll identify any critical repairs that have to be done. So the cleaner a property you can get to begin with, the easier it is to get through. And this is a simple one, important on the residential side as well. But take pictures of the properties you look at. Get interior, get exterior pictures. They're useful for lenders to get a feel for the property through pictures. The fourth C, capital. Sorry, a couple components of our capital. So our equity, our down payment, net worth, we've touched upon, liquidity, and an REO schedule. So your down payment, you'll hear it referred to as equity in the commercial world. It's real common to say, hey, what equity requirement, or I'll raise equity for the down payment. A good number to have in mind in commercial real estate, especially multifamily, is 25% down payment to get your loan done. So 75% loan to value. There are programs that can go up from there. 80% loan to value, even 85 is doable. There's some loan programs where if you have less leverage, you can get better pricing and terms. Your down payment shows their skin in the game, and typically the people that are putting money into it, at least on a material level, about 20% and above, are usually guarantors on the loans. And some of you may be asking, well, what about these infomercials where they talk about 100% financing on commercial real estate and those sorts of things? Well, it's very nuanced. We won't go down that rabbit hole, but those sorts of loans really don't exist on 100% financing loans. Transactions can be done without any money out of your own pocket, but it requires syndication, raising equity investors, and those people are certainly going to get a return, so it's going to really cut into your cash flows and return on your investment, but again, it's a way to do it. I think it's important to touch upon that 100% financing, at least in the traditional commercial mortgage world, isn't really part of the show. There's some net worth requirements on most commercial loans. Again, they vary from loan to loan, but a good benchmark as well is to have a net worth equal to your loan amount for the loan that you're seeking. Does that make sense? So if you want $1 million loan, a commercial real estate loan, you want to show a net worth equal to $1 million to get that loan. Hopefully that makes sense.
Well, can they count your equity in your properties for that?
Yeah, oh certainly, yeah. It doesn't have to be cash or anything like that.
Well, what if you have 800K in debt somewhere else? Do you only get 200K more?
Well,
That's your net worth.
again, if it's what your
Just
net worth is, right? So you could have a $2 million property. There's 1.5 million. So the 500,000 equity that you have would contribute to your net worth or qualify for that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
How do you do commercial loans where you're not liable for the loan, but somebody, you want to not to be liable for the loan that you're doing?
Good question. Just so everyone heard, he asked, how do you do a commercial loan where you're not liable for the loan? And
What does that
what
call first?
what you're asking is non-recourse, right? And the short answer is that loan doesn't exist because you're still going to be liable for that loan. The difference between recourse and non-recourse, and we're actually a non-recourse lender. Banks are typically recourse. What the recourse means is the property and any other property you own and any personal assets, or you're signing on the line that the bank, that lender can come after everything you've got for that property if it goes bad, if that loan goes bad. Non-recourse, only the property that is the loan is against is the collateral. So there's
So even if those properties are in a trust or some other entity, they can still come after those as well?
yeah, on a recourse. Yes. So that's typically how those loans are structured, but
Banks are evil, just say it.
Just don't lose the property.
yeah, I mean that's down the road. Non-recourse is a nice thing to have, but you are going to be liable when you sign on the dotted line. I mean, you can't eliminate liability. You have to guarantee the payment, but the property's there to support that.
But you're a non-recourse lender,
Correct.
so there's no personal guarantee on it, it's just the property.
No, there is a personal guarantee. The non-recourse really means just the property is the collateral. So if the loan goes bad, they can take the property and any equity in it, but not any other assets you
Not
have.
your personal loan.
Correct.
They can still sue you probably, but it's a little bit more protected.
It's definitely more protected, yeah. It's an important distinction. It's a little bit of one of those weeds conversations, so happy to have some of those conversations offline.
So what do you typically see between agency loan and non-agency loan when it comes to net in terms of the required location you see out there? I know, for example, it's pretty much like this came out with more recent changes.
Yeah, you asked on an agency loan, Fannie and Freddie. Again, this is a specific question here, but it's a 1-to-1 ratio on net worth to loan amount. So it's a hard line in the sand with the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac commercial multifamily loans.
Okay, and how many non-agency do you see them have the same kind of requirement?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Like the traditional banks, what do you for these banks?
It's typically north of that. Could be 1.5 or 2 on that. So anyway, if you fall short, again, we talked about partnerships are really common. So partnerships are a way to solve for that problem. Again, one of our blind spots is new investors. We don't do things to build net worth. Matt hung on to this $26,000 property, 26.
Yeah.
I remember.
Yeah.
He's parlayed that. He's used that to grow his net worth, so he could build his portfolio. If you're a flipper, you're flipping 10 properties a year, hang on to one or two, start building that net worth, and develop relationships with high net worth individuals. Don't do it with an agenda. You may not call upon them, and you're going to have more success with them if it's not with an agenda, but you build a genuine relationship with them. Liquidity is a fancy word for cash reserves, and we always like to see some money in the bank, some reserves for our commercial loans. So that's money that it's not held in escrow. It can be used cumulatively, so you can use that percentage. That we'll call it a 5% number, but you want to really show some cash reserves in the bank to secure the loan. Again, it's just a fallback. It's a way to reduce that risk to know, hey, there's some money on the other side of this. And again, this is a blind spot we have, right? There's no cash reserves. We spend every dime we have to get the investment. We don't take consideration for those reserves. It's important to have a percentage of your net worth, of your portfolio, if you will, in a money market account. Just have some cash on hand that's just there for a rainy day. Question here?
Your retirement funds count at all towards that?
They need to be outside of a retirement account. So, yeah, it's best if they're not.
It counts for net worth, but not for liquidity.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Because it's only a fund. It's only a fund.
No.
Yeah.
I have a comment.
Yeah.
I had a client 2 months ago pull 35 grand out of a house. It's a decent amount for most people. And he wanted to buy a property, and we called him 2 days ago, and it's all gone. Okay? So why I'm bringing this up is he doesn't have any money. Like, investing is not like, oh, I'm going to work with you for 90 days and I'm like a guru. You got to establish habits. So why on that 5%, Fannie Mae on the residential, Freddie Mac just changed their guidelines last week that they're going to require a percentage of what you have in loans in liquid cash, not retirements. They're changing, depends on how many properties you have. So it's changed from rather than like, hey, 6 months of PITI. So for a quick example, this is your last blind spot?
I got a couple more.
A couple more, okay.
Yeah, we're set.
But
Where-
people are you're not gonna succeed if you don't have liquidity. So like just learn to save, and it's okay to have money earning 0.5%. It's okay because you never know when you need it, and then when the market corrects, sometime we always have cycles. You want to have liquidity because think of all the other people the last cycle we did. You learn a lot from what happened. So I just thought it was interesting. The guy has got 35 grand gone. It could be relative. It could be 350 grand.
So why did Fannie Mac change this requirement?
So what happens on loans for residential, real quick, they audit files based on what's performing and what's not. So if they have a bunch of foreclosures, they change their guidelines because what they want to do is not have people foreclose. So if you think about it, if you had $5 million in residential real estate and you have to have 5% in liquid funds, that's 250 grand?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not going to lose that. Now, if you have $5 million in real estate. So if you think about it. So it's just having good financials.
What about holding the politicians accountable as well to create the problems?
You can contact them.
Property, or is that on your
It's on investment properties.
Is that off the value of the real estate, or is that the loan balance?
No, the balance.
And that, so it's changed from the 6 months?
Yeah, it just barely changed like last week.
Is it 5%?
No, it's layered based on the more debt you have and how many properties you have. I gotta figure it out on Monday.
So if you have a loan currently in the process?
No, it's all new loans.
All in the.
So these are commercial principles that are percolating
Yeah,
down to
yeah,
the residential world.
Yeah,
It's exactly
it's
what's
good.
happening.
It makes you more of a solid investor.
Yeah. And we've talked about a couple of scare tactics, but the actual default rate on multifamily loans from Fannie and Freddie and FHA insurance companies is it's half or less than 0.5%. I mean, it's so small. It's so uncommon that these go sideways because we're extracting all the risk in the process of doing the things that we're talking about here today. So, your REO schedule. Who's got an REO schedule? See less hands on this one. This is a real important document, especially if you've got a handful of properties. Quick story on this one. A client lives up in Midways. He owns about 10 or 11 smaller properties, primarily in southern Utah. He's looking to take his game to the next level. He's got about $4 million in equity in this, and yeah, about a $12 million portfolio, about $4 million in equity, looking to step his game up by going through and putting together a very detailed REO schedule. I can send you all a template, email me if you want, give you everything you need. This document was something that once we had the information, we could easily assess what to do as far as his next steps. He's off to the races. He's like, the refi opportunity isn't here for me. What I want to do is lever up. It's time for him to reposition his portfolio. His REO schedule helped him and us make that determination in really a matter of minutes. So these are some things to include there. Again, if you want a good complete template, I'm happy to send it to you. And then the fifth C is conditions. This is really out of our control, but there's market conditions. There's macroeconomic conditions, on a national level, state, even regional. And these things are taken into consideration by your lender on what's happening in the climate. It's a lot easier to get money now than it was in 2009 and 10 and 11 when the capital markets were frozen. And just like Matt said, when it comes back to this liquidity or cash on hand, Warren Buffett's become a billionaire, not a millionaire, a billionaire, by being fearful when others are greedy and greedy when others are fearful. So having some cash on hand is a great thing to have when the cycles come. So this is the last blind spot, Matt, and really the last point. There's 3 crucial documents that you should have readily available: your personal financial statement, your REO schedule, and your real estate resume. That's it. Thanks for your time.
Any generic oh, Ben in the back.
What do you do if you're buying a multifamily property and they don't have some of that stuff like a rental?
That's a fun one. It happens a lot. You'd be surprised how many owners of commercial real estate are, especially in multifamily or mom and pop and maybe generationally, do not keep good records. It makes it difficult from an analysis standpoint as well as a lending standpoint. One solution is to gather financial bills, bank statements, put it together yourself. But the first thing I'd do is negotiate, get a better price. You're gonna get a discount because they haven't had good records, because there's nothing to show that the property's performed in a certain way, which really derives your value. But in some cases, we have to create them, but otherwise, do the best you can, and we understand that sometimes there isn't the documentation that you have, but certainly get a discount for it.
You mentioned the credit scores. I go on, there's lots of sites that will give you credit scores, so I go on and look at those and my credit score, and then the mortgage lender goes in and looks at my credit score, and they say, well, ours are much lower than what they say over there, we take ours. Why would they be different? And how do I prevent?
Do you want to handle this, Matt? You're looking at that every day. Credit scores is just a sliver, but
Yeah, they change daily.
Well, shouldn't mine be somewhat pretty close to the?
I think there's
What the lender is, if we're looking at them both on the same day?
Well, you're looking at something for free that's monitoring and
I'm paying for this one.
Of course you are. You're paying
No,
for it. That was
no,
a joke.
yeah.
That's a
yeah.
joke. Okay. When you do a hard inquiry, they're going to take a snapshot that day.
Right.
So you could have different stuff from 1 to 3 weeks or 1 to 3 different days. The monitoring to me has not been as accurate. A hard inquiry is more accurate.
Plus,
They have their own proprietary way to try to determine what it
And
is.
every time they do that hard inquiry, my score
It only goes down 2 points, not very much.
You can contact them directly
Unless they
once
do
a
it.
year.
Yeah, you can
And
get
it's
free.
do it for
You can get
free,
free credit
and it
reports
doesn't
once a
count
year.
against
But
you.
you know what? I got a better solution. He gave you a book. I'm being serious. I'm gonna get that book. Liz Wilson's really smart. You want to learn more about how credit works? You can use that. Josh, last question in the back because you're so tall and you're a bishop.
It's on the rental, in purchasing and for selling, we looked at like, we wanna sell a property and it's sell it financial, we wanna refinance. We thought about going to an escrow company, so we have that third party verification of consistent payment. Is there any other third party verification for that rental?
you could do audited financials. That would be your workaround. Have a CPA audit them. That's on bigger commercial loans. That comes more into play. Most are prepared by your property manager or maybe a bookkeeper or the owner themselves. So if you
The only way is a third party accounting for
yeah, you could have an audit, CPA audit it.
Wait, let me clarify. Are you selling residential or commercial?
residential.
I would say for residential, you should be able to provide your profit and loss statement.
What I mean is on-time performance of the rent.
You can track that. It's an Excel
Well, yeah,
spread.
I can have a spreadsheet, but I can create that.
You can do bank statements as well. You could have tenants deposit directly into the account, and your bank statement would show that as well.
Cool. Let's give a round of applause for Paul. Thank you, Paul.